Merch Podcast. I'm Camila, and this is my dad Benji. This is episode 17, and if you have not checked us out before, all our episodes are on Spotify and on YouTube.
Well, yes, welcome back, everybody. We maybe took a 2 to 3 week break. It was the beginning of school here. Things are in motion, but kind of settled down. Things are good, right, Camila?
Yeah, for now.
Yeah, for now. No, come on, I think a better start of the year compared to last year,
Yeah.
right?
Well, yeah.
More familiar faces.
Yeah, I've lived here for a year now, so it's comfortable
Yeah.
to go to school. But yeah.
Yeah, correct. So things are good, and we're hoping that today's episode will excite you. I'm super excited because this has been a very, very, very long time coming for me. If you do not know me, then you probably haven't heard my love for Deadwood, the HBO series, and also the movie that came out in 2019 to conclude the theme of the series. But there's a lot more that I wanted to explore just apart from a series, right? The themes and the subjects and the history behind it to me are absolutely fascinating. It's so deeply entrenched in, to me, what is the US, and really this is more of a homage to David Milch, the creator and the writer of the series. And so what I want to do is talk, put it as usual, digress, put things in context for you, and then we'll explore not only the series but also what it means to write, to create. It's important to note that next week David Milch will be releasing his memoir called Life's Work. It's an important piece of work because I think he's reflecting on his past, he's reflecting on his sins, if you want, but mostly the creative process, his philosophies of life, and also knowing where he's at personally, having been diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2015. It was a kind of an urgency, not only obviously to conclude kind of, I think, what hit his masterpiece with Deadwood and the movie, but also this book. And so we'll talk a little bit more in detail. But Deadwood, a town in South Dakota. Shout out to all the folks out there who are trying to keep the legends alive of the Wild West. Yeah. COVID shut us down. We didn't get a chance to go when we were in Colorado, which is a very sad thing for me. But help us understand, Camila, because here we're back in the late 1800s, and we've talked about this theme in previous podcasts with swimming, with history, with politics, but this is a very particular intersection and time of history. So help people understand or set the stage.
Right. So again, late 1800s. So about in 1874, there was a group of miners that arrived, and Deadwood's in this canyon surrounded by these hills called the Black Hills. And so it's named Deadwood because they found a bunch of dead trees literally in the middle of the canyon, so that's where it got its name. But they discovered gold in this small little canyon, and it wasn't a rumor got out in 1876 that there was gold, and 25,000 people within like several weeks came to this town. Well, it wasn't even a town yet, but came to this camping site and started going for gold. And it was in the middle of the gold rush, and people were already moving to the west to find gold. So, it was a desperate era.
And this is a massive part of the history of the US, but also of many countries. When precious minerals, natural resources are discovered, it creates population movement, it creates booms, it creates chaos. Yeah. Because as I said, I think you mentioned, it's within a few weeks to a year, there was 25,000 people that descended upon this town
within a month.
Without really any sort of organization.
No, there was no law.
There
was no form of government either. in this town. So
Yes, that's important. What does that mean at the time?
It was kind of a mess, and so the town basically came up with this reputation for itself of like violence, because there was no rules and they kind of just did what they wanted. But at the same time, that like attracted a bunch of people, maybe not good people, but it attracted a lot of people, and the town basically created this reputation for itself. It was like, well, we do what we want, and it was perceived as a violent and vulgar town and kind of survival of the fittest in that sense. But
It used to be Indian reservation, Sioux reservation, and sorry, not reservation. It used to be Sioux territory. My bad. And here comes again the white man taking over the natural resources. It obviously created tensions with the Indians, but this rush during a time that also was a very rushed era, because what else is going on around the world and in the U.S. in this time?
Well, the late 1800s was the start of like the Gilded Age, so like the industry's kind of like picking up, and there's kind of a demand to create a bunch of new things and find new resources and whatnot. So, and it was also, the Civil War ended several years before that, so it was kind of like the Reconstruction era
Correct.
of the United States. So there was politically some tension.
And what we've always found out in countries that have ended some sort of civil strife, some sort of war, people are looking for something new, right? They're a bit depressed, they're looking for excitement. And here is a town that offers no law, a promise of riches and abundances, if you can get there, right? Because it's not a very...
Well, wasn't the currency in the town gold?
Well, yes.
Yeah.
Like, they were using gold as a currency, and you see that throughout the series, and we'll talk about that. But you're right. This is the second industrial revolution that was from the mid 1850s, 1860s, 70s, all the way to 1920. This is 11 million people moving to cities, right? So even though Deadwood obviously is not a city, what's interesting about Deadwood is that they had to create on the fly. And as we know with human beings, we're a mess. We're a mess in our everyday lives, but here we are trying to organize ourselves. So what more happened from a historical standpoint so people can understand, and then that's going to set the tone for talking about the series and the movie.
Right. So like within a month, they had already set up like a bunch of little shops and whatnot. Like literally within a month, there was already. I read that there was a dance club that was already opening up where people could go dancing and drink. So like, I mean, there was this rush to just create business there, and it very quickly became a very popular city. And I mean, it was really fast. It was like boom and boom. There wasn't really a build up. It was just kind of like the next day, there's a new business, and people just kept building and building. And within a month, there was a main street already that they had built out where everybody would go day to day and work and whatnot. So,
by the way, small anecdote on this main street and also the building of Deadwood. There were actually 3 fires in 1879, 1894, 1899 because of maybe faulty wiring or also...
Or someone just started the day.
Or some drunk person with whiskey and tobacco. It's just wood everywhere. So the town burned down 3 times, and actually some of the folks that owned saloons, they had to reconstruct a couple of times, even the characters that are in the movie. Al Swearingen, for example, with the Gem Saloon, even Seth Bullock and Sol Starr, who owned their business and also had a hotel. And that's something that's fascinating with the series and going to history. It brought in some very interesting characters, as you were saying, Camila. Wild Bill Hickok, who was a known figure, not only was previously a sheriff, but also had been recruited to be kind of like the figure of the Wild West, the fastest gun in the West, shows up in July with Calamity Jane, another character, and a gentleman named Charlie Utter. And within August, he's killed and shot at a poker table by the coward named Jack McCall.
Because of gambling.
Because of gambling.
Gambling was such a big thing in that town, too. Like, people had issues with gambling, and people would die because of gambling. And that's why like the reputation is so violent, because it's like you do one wrong thing, one wrong move, or you say one wrong thing, like you're dead. You're dead.
When you know what happens, it reminded me of the stories. I mean, maybe not the same, but when the U.S. and especially in North Dakota, interesting enough, started fracking in the shale revolution, and there was a ton of oil, and the price of oil was very high. There were towns in North Dakota that suddenly had an influx of all these young workers, drivers, and all, and they didn't have enough hotel rooms, enough this and that. And also, guess what? If you're young, you're not married, you're a bit agitated, you got money, you're gonna spend it on distractions, booze, women, and then also it's gonna create chaos and fights, right? And deaths. And that's the problem, is that here comes, you bring up a very good thing, I mean, I say, when does order come about? Does order ever come about? And it's something that's central to the theme of David Milch's writing in the series, is how do you create order out of chaos? So what have you read or what have you heard and what have you researched that is to help you understand that? And then I'll go into the different seasons.
Well, when I was looking at the interview with David Milch, and he was talking about how these people had no government and they really kind of had no way of like creating order, it was like through language, I guess. And he talks about how you had to watch what you say, and like the way that you communicate with people, and like not showing like too many of your cards, but also like showing the right cards. So like that was kind of that town's, I guess, government or rule. Like you can't say certain things and you can't do certain things, but it was mostly like the way that they talked was they were saying a lot without saying a lot. And so that was like, that was what David would like try, I guess, to embody with the language and whatnot, that like that was their source of, I guess, rule in a sense. Where people just have this built-in respect for each other, and if you say something wrong, well then I don't respect you and you're out. That was kind of like,
But you bring up a fantastic point, Camila, because in that interview, which I remember, and also in the series, again, which I'll get to, there's really 3 levels of languages, because you brought up the Gilded Age, the Victorian Age. What people are doing out in the East Coast and maybe San Francisco is emulating the British colonial imperialism rule that we talked about, the proper English and, and being a lady and being a gentleman. So there's that. Right? And that's one form of language, very proper. You got to think like British English, right? It's almost the last time it's not the last time the US expressed itself correctly, but it almost was, right? It lasted a bit until the 50s, but then it died out. Then the second level is the Victorian Age plus the camp mining kind of talk. So if you were able to express yourself clearly, very poetically almost, but at the same time mix in a bit of the obscenity, and at the same time when you need to be a bit forceful, maybe in a tense situation, then that served you. But then there was also the camp mining obscenity talks, and that was on another level. And that's where you're dealing with rough miners, whether they be American, whether there was also Cornish folks that arrived, and even there was a Chinatown at the time, not saying that, and then they barely spoke English, but there was 250 people who had formed the Chinatown working in the service industry, the laundries in hotels, and they were hated on. So this is, as I'm saying, I wish I was a fly on the wall in that time, because I cannot imagine what it felt like entering a saloon. But that's what, and let me get to this point now, that's what the series does so well. And we'll get back to David Milch. I think you brought up a very, very powerful point, which I want to talk about, language. But let's talk about the series. The series came out in 2004. It did 3 seasons and abruptly ended in 2006. Kind of like, without giving too much details away, it was a very soft cliffhanger, and it wasn't enough. And a lot of people were waiting for it, including Abuela. We were talking, we're like, well, what happened? And when it didn't come in 2007, I think there was a lot of tears in the alleys, at least for me, right? But let me walk you through the different seasons so you understand. Season 1, it starts in 1876. It's about 6 months into the foundation of the camp, right? So things are established. There is a main street, right? And it's chaos at its prime. It's organized chaos. And why do I say organized chaos? And it's almost a hark to organized crime, because here you have a saloon owner of the Gem Saloon named Al Swearingen, who is the actor is Ian McShane, and I'll be headlining him in a moment, who knows the ins and outs of the town, and no business or no rumor is unheard of without going through Al. He wants to know everything because essentially he's a gangster, he's a pimp. His real life story, and I sent Abuelo the real picture of him, he was not the kindest man, right? They give him some humanity in the series, thank God. But yes, you meet this Al Swearingen where the world evolves around him in this chaos. And so there are also other types of characters. Wild Bill Hickok, I mentioned, Calamity James, and especially the sheriff. So we meet the main characters of the series, the sheriff, so that's the order element. That's Seth Bullock, played by Timothy Oliphant. We love you. I love all your interviews on Conan, by the way. His work on Star Wars, he's awesome. By the way, there's so many wonderful performances in this series. Why it didn't win more awards is astonishing to me, and especially David Milch writing, but we'll get to that. So that's season 1, kind of getting that sense of the organized chaos. I don't want to give too many details because I want folks to see it, right? I don't want to give too much away. Season 2 is in 1877, right? So not far, we're about 7 months later than season 1. Now it's, the theme for me here is the difficult road to order. So how do you get to civilization now that you've kind of got some characters and themes established in the camp, right? There is the struggle between, as expected, the sheriff and the saloon owner, which culminates into the fight. There's a new brothel that comes into town, Les Chez Amis, that broke off from one of the saloons, the Bella Union. We see a fight over Chinatown and the control of Chinatown and the control of prostitution and also the opium trade. So here we are, Al Swearingen was running the opium trade in Deadwood. For real. Mm-hmm. By the way, this guy married 3 times. He was a cancer, by the way. He married 3 times, and he ended up dead in a streetcar, stabbed in Denver. So when we walked around where the streetcars are?
Whack, because I'm wearing Denver shirt.
You are wearing it, so that's why I wanted to...
not coincidentally.
But season two marks also the beginning of the arrival of heavy politics. As you pointed out, that rush towards money, what happens? The moment there's money, people want to start to control it, right? Through banks, through politics,
power, yeah.
Through regulation, through power, correct. And that power is represented by a gentleman named George Hearst, who did exist, and he was there to kind of pretty much rape the land and steal the gold.
Yep.
And take it over. And then in season 3, so we have a lot more order. The town is finally, at the end of season 2, annexed to the Dakotas. It's still not a state, but it has been annexed. And now more political interests are coming into play, more business interests that gets heightened. And guess what? Now it's murders for convenience of murders. It's political moves and rigging of elections in order to satisfy the parties that are in control. Does that sound all familiar? Because you know what's fascinating about this? 100 years earlier, the U.S. is celebrating its creation, right? 1776. Here in 1876, here comes Deadwood 100 years later. Your dad is only born 100 years after 1876. And it's really to reinforce something that this country, the U.S., and also just time, it's a very young country, and also it is one that has been forged in excess violence and abusing of the land. And I don't know if you remember in the interview, you brought up your good point about language, is the obscenity from the miners is completely justified, at least in the creator's mind.
The energy of the time.
The energies of the time, but also if you are raping the land, which you are, sorry to use the word, you're fucking it, right? And that's this word, in the first episode, by the way, the F word was used 43 times.
Well, yeah, I noticed that from the little clips that I have never watched the show, but from the clips that they put in the interview, I was like,
yes.
So they're basically just saying something without saying something. They're just swearing.
Yes.
I feel like to cover up.
Got it.
A lot of.
What?
That's why I was like, they're saying a lot without saying a lot, because you look at the clips of the characters or the actors like fighting, like pretending like they're fighting. They're just swearing a lot.
Correct.
They're not really like discussing business.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they're just like insulting each other, and then that's that. You know, I don't know why. That's like when I was looking at the clips, there was just the one scene where the guy just kept swearing and swearing at this guy, and they were supposed to be talking about business, but he just kept swearing and then told him to get lost, basically. And I was like, well, you didn't really resolve anything, but you know not to mess with this guy because he's gonna kill you, right?
Exactly.
So it's kind of like that. They're saying a lot without saying a lot.
Correct. And throughout all this series, again, yes, politics, business, by the way, control of the press, control of the media, the person who has that power wields a very mighty sword.
They had a magazine within the first 2 weeks of that place being
Correct.
built. So, yeah, rumors and all that kind of thing started very fast in that town. And if you read the newspapers too, the language is the same in the newspapers.
Correct.
It's like, it's not very,
so
it's just like nobody was, I feel like just, I don't know how to put it, but like the language, people were just adding more wood to the fire.
Yes,
I
they
feel
were.
like nobody really tried to fix it, or I feel like it didn't really change because it's just like,
well,
like that's that.
I'm gonna ask forgiveness on the next segment, because I'm gonna start off now with a quote and it'll lead to other quotes, and we'll talk about that power of language that you mentioned, which is fantastic. There's a lot of rude words here, so it's not me here. I want to be clear, but talking about the control of the press and the media. In season 3, the little tidbit, there's a gentleman who comes with a telegraph, is able to send messages quicker. The telephone's not there yet. His name is Blazanov, I think, and Blazanov, Al Swearingen wants him to set up behind his saloon and also have a back way to the press area, so he can not only read other people's messages, especially George Hurst, but then also control the message, right? But they get to a point where he tries to make Blazanov become unethical. Right? Again, spy or control the message, and he resists, but he gets to a point where he realizes how bloody evil George Hurst is. And so then Blazanov finally says, fuck confidentiality of communication. And he says that to Al Swearingen, and Al Swearingen is like, well, wouldn't you also like to fuck a woman? Because he has a brothel. And Blazanov goes, well, I hope to also eventually. Mm-hmm. So here is two very vulgar exchanges, but one is about obviously sex and in exchange for money. But before that, it's about, well, if this guy is playing that dirty, we need to control the narrative. We need to spy on him. And so there goes the press. So just to show you that whoever yields that power of language, going back to your theme, whoever is able to express themselves in a correct way or even in a vulgar way, words have weight. They're almost more deadly than swords, right? The pen is mightier than the sword, is the expression. So I think that brings us to David Milch and the creator and the writer. And I cannot stress enough, whether you don't like the rude words or whatever, that's not the point. You have to understand that some soliloquies and exchanges are very Shakespearean, but as I said, mixed in with that 3-level Victorian plus mining, or just mining language, right? Those 3 levels. So I'm going to go through a couple of quotes here so you guys understand what I'm talking about. And hopefully you appreciate the philosophical aspect. Please ignore the rude words. And a lot of them, not all, are really related to Ian McShane's character, Al Swearingen, who to me is the centerpiece of it all. And to me, probably the most brilliant actor and the most brilliant character I've ever encountered, close to maybe Tony Soprano in The Sopranos. There's no other series for me that has done it. I've watched it at least 4 times. I've watched the movie now 2-3 times, and I keep on finding new things. This is the beauty of David Milch. And by the way, in an interview, and I'll get to the quotes, but in an interview, Timothy Oliphant, the sheriff, Seth Bullock, says that David Milch adds so much layers to his characters, but he even adds layers to extras. So for example, in the movie, they're dragging out a character in the street, and one guy screams, I hope he dies in the street. And any other writer would have stopped there, right? Because he's angry at the politician and he screams like the mob. But you know what he adds? Like my father did. And then Timothy Oliphant was like, wait, stop. Could we find out the story about his father? Because that sounds fascinating to me. And that's the point of writing. With just a few words, a sentence, you shift momentum. You create consequences, right? So here's a few. This is Al talking to one of his characters, or maybe during a soliloquy. And hopefully you appreciate this, Camila, too. He says, and obviously it's David Milch's writing, pain or damage don't end the world, or despair, or fucking beatings. He goes, the world ends when you're dead. So until then, you have more punishment in store. So stand it like a man and maybe give some back. You see how harsh this world is? It goes to your point of this. If you're not clear as a man, as a person, I don't want to, there was a lot of tough women, Calamity Jane was really tough and others, but it's a tough time, okay?
Survival of the fittest.
Here's another one. Al, during his business dealings, says, if I bleat, you know what bleating means? Like a sheep.
Oh, bro.
He goes,
Okay.
if I bleat when I speak, it's because I just got fucking fleeced.
Bruh.
So you understand? He got killed. But
Yeah.
David Milch should have been a battle rapper to me, because he's dropping gems. If I bleat when I speak, it's because I got fucking fleeced. That's amazing to me. He lost him.
Actually, hold on.
Tell me.
I found that a lot of the times David would write the script and whatever, and then he'd like stop in the middle of the scene and he'd like, I don't like it, and then he'd just like rewrite the whole thing, or
Yeah.
he'd just like make some of the characters like improv, and then he'd be like, well, I don't know, we're just gonna see where it goes. So a lot of the time, some of the characters improved, but with the help of David Milch, obviously. But David Milch, like, he didn't really like.
There's a lot of like there. I don't know what you're saying.
Well, it was very brief in the interview, but he didn't really care where the story went, I guess.
Yes.
And
he was more interested in
kind
the
of was
characters.
just- yeah, he was kind of more like creative in that sense, where he just like.
What would the character do? What would they really say?
He just gave them free. Yeah.
Yeah.
He wanted them to like embody the character, so he kind of just gave them free reign as to like what they thought the character would say.
That obsessiveness, that micromanagement, some people would call it on set, was why every single actor in that series came back for the movie, if they were still alive, by the way. Rest in peace to Powers Booth and others who passed away. But every single person had utmost respect for David Milch, because he would, one, let you create the character from every interview that I've seen, and then he goes, do you think, I think talking to Timothy, he's like, do you think, Al would say that? Or do you think the sheriff would say that? And it's almost like trusting the actor and the creative process, right? Very artsy in that sense, that you are embodying that character, and then you are going to know instinctively what to say is right. And you're completely right there. Here's another another one from Al, which I love. He's negotiating with George Hurst, and George Hurst fills up. It was very customary to drink not just, hey, one shot and we celebrate, to drink almost like half a bottle while talking, right? So they have their shot of whiskey when they're starting to talk, and Al goes to George, "You see empty, sir? Do not pause and inquire. Simply assume and refill." So there was a lot of alcoholics there, and then that's when you can see that Al Swearingen was able to talk Victorian plus mining plus Victorian plus Al. That's why Al was so brilliant. Okay, here's another one going back to that pain or damage, again from Al. He has to do a lot of things to maintain order, or his order, the organized chaos. And his quote is, "In life, you have to do a lot of things that you don't fucking want to do." He goes, many times, that's what the fuck life is. One vile fucking task after another. Now listen, the scene you have to understand is either after a death, or he probably had to kill somebody, so you can understand the language. But sometimes he's right. People get exasperated with life, and I can only imagine in that town, it's like dealing with Chinatown, dealing with the opium trade, the prostitution, the miners coming in, a fight downstairs, cleaning blood. It never stops. This one I love a lot. We see in management, for example, Camila, in my job, and also throughout jobs that I've had, and also people, motivational speakers, always talk about change, right? They say, accept change, right? And here's one that's beautiful from Al, and again, from David Milch. It says, "Change ain't looking for friends. Change calls the tune we all dance to." And here we are. I think that quote to me is super powerful, because it really does encapsulate what we talked about, the Victorian age, the Industrial Revolution, and this meeting of the appropriate, or the modern, with barbaric nothingness and law, no law. It really is. So change calls the tune we all dance to. And isn't that right? So now talking about politics, we move to Hearst. Hearst goes, and remember, Hearst is the most powerful businessman at the time. He owns a lot of the mining, and he is a ruthless character. And he says, "Elections cannot inconvenience me. They ratify my will, or I neuter them." So what is he telling you here? And what are we telling about the history of the US? The people that are in power, they will give you the illusion that you're voting and you're doing something right. But most of the times, they're the ones who hold the bag of tricks, and they're the ones who decide. And if it doesn't go to their liking, then they neuter them in one way or another. So it's just to show you that business interest and political interest will sometimes completely inundate a town. And that's the survival of Deadwood, which you'll see in the movie. Here's one from Calamity Jane. Now, I didn't want to just talk about the men. Calamity Jane came with Wild Bill Hickok in real life. I sent you some photos, Abuela, of the real person. She was also a gunslinger. She also helped in the saloon when with the ladies. Actually worked for Al at one point. And same thing. She struggles with alcoholism, with her identity, and also I think with her sexuality, which they deal with, but in a very polite and well done way. So she says, "Every day takes figuring out all over again how to fucking live." And I think that shows you how fragile life was at the time. Because you could wake up one day, as you said, thinking you're going to play a poker hand, and then you're shot in the back, like Wild Bill Hickok. Or one false word, one false eye, maybe the miner who spent all day trying to dig up that gold shows up to the bar. He's not having a good day and he's trying to drink away his sorrows. You bump into him and suddenly there's a knife in your gut, right? So this is the type of environment we're in, and the character and also the real life person is expressing that. This one I like a lot. It's vulgar again, Camila, but again, it's the clash between Hearst and the sheriff. So again, that chaos meeting order, meeting the business and political interest. Hearst goes to Sheriff Bullock. He's like, Sheriff, when I say go fuck yourself, he goes, will you put that down to drunkenness or a high estimate of your athleticism? Do you understand?
No, I don't get it.
Okay, so he's saying, he's like, when I tell you to go fuck yourself, he goes, do you think it's because I'm drunk? Or it's because I have a high estimate the fact that you can actually fuck yourself, like screw yourself, your high state of athleticism. Do you understand why language is so powerful?
Yeah.
You understand, right?
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Okay, and here's another one to end our quote day, because as I said, I could have gone all day with just quotes. I think maximum. There is a hotel owner named E.B. Farnham who also became mayor. And there's a gentleman who was kind of a very dirty person, an agent on behalf of Hearst, but who is finally gets his due, right? And E.B. Farnham had many kind of Shakespearean soliloquies to himself, but then he's talking to him, he goes, some ancient Italian maxim, that's like a proverb, a saying, fits our situation. He goes, whose particulars escape me? Because he tries to be more intelligent than he really is. And Francis Walcott, the character, goes, is the gist of it that I'm shit out of luck? And E.B. Farnham responds, did they speak that way back then? So it's absolutely brilliant, the writing, and I really, David Milch to me is, listen, if you don't know him, by the way, as I said, September 13th, Life's Work is coming out. He also wrote Hill Street Blues, I think in the 70s, 80s, and he also co-created and wrote for NYPD Blue. So the folks that were following that, 80s, 90s, you'll find some stuff about it. But what do you think about those quotes? Do you see that fitting in? Obviously, he's taking some liberties as an artist, right? As a creative, but it seems fitting to what you told me about the history and also what you've understood.
I think that it's very fitting for the society that they were in and the, I guess, tensions of the time, you know? People were just trying to make money and people were trying to work and stuff. And I mean, life, I guess, the way that they talk about life and whatnot for the time, and it's not the same as it is now, but still, even now, life sometimes can suck and whatnot, but I imagine it was worse back then. So it makes a lot of sense for what those people were going through, even though it was like, you can see it as violent and aggressive and in like a negative light, but I think that people were just trying to survive, you know? So I think that
that basic instinct of survival will make you do things that are unimaginable to our eye and our minds right now, because we do have a lot more organizational order, right? But it's also a very harsh reminder that any single time things can change. And to kind of conclude today, the movie came out in 2019, so you're talking about over 13 years since the series ended. And in the movie, which he sets in 1889, when finally Deadwood is part of the Dakotas, but also South Dakota becomes a state. By the way, I think Colorado was only was in 1876. It became the 38th state of the U.S. just at that time. So it's not just new to Deadwood. These territories, these Western territories and this gold rush really created what is the United States of America on the west side, right? So in the movie, we're celebrating the statehood. We are returning, there's a return of past and present characters, and there is really a clash now at the high level between George Hearst coming back as the U.S. Senator of California, U.S. Junior Senator of California, and Charlie Utter, one of the main characters who still has land that conflicts with his business interest, i.e. installing telephone lines. So that's the kind of the tension and the premise of it. But we revisit some old loves. We revisit Al, who is sick. We revisit where the sheriff, who's become a U.S. Marshal, is as a man, as a family man. And I think the themes of the overreach of politicians, the overreach of business interests, clashing with now a real community. And here comes that order. In the movie, what he wanted to show was listen, whether you're a good, bad person or however people perceive you, you are getting, if you go through those trials and tribulations, if you are forged as a community to fire and you become cast in steel, shout out to Aha, that gives you power, because then through the symbols or traditions of weddings, ceremonies, titles, family values, respect, you do become a city, you do become a people. And so what happens in the movie, and I think David Milch to me was sending a sign to us all now, is be very careful of how much power business and politics can get, because we also as a people have power, and also we're allowed to stand up against that power. Now, what are the consequences? It's bloody.
Right.
Revolutions are bloody, right? And I think what is wonderful about the movie and what is a bit sad about it is we know he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2015. David Milch now lives in a facility. I've seen a few interviews, which, you know, kind of breaks my heart, but he's still working with his wife, trying to write. Some days are good, some days are bad. But the gentleman who did True Detective, Nick Pisolata, who it's a famous series on HBO, he helped him with the script, but he could not be, David Milch could not be present on set like he was. So the actor said, listen, we obviously jumped at the occasion to be back in the movie and to conclude this famous chapter in their lives, and the most rich chapter for some in terms of being an artist. Mm-hmm. But he could not be on set. So that was the only, you know, sad part, because he was so involved, as you mentioned, with the writing and with trying to understand who these characters were. Yeah. So as we conclude today, I'll say one more thing for David Milch. Is one of the actors, Earl Brown, who plays Dan Doherty. He's the right-hand man of Al, an assassin, but also a good little chap, right? He went to visit David, and in David's classical form, I'm going to end with a quote. He's in a facility, and they're talking about how some days are good, some days are bad. And this is what David said about getting old. The indignities of decrepitude are boundless. Do you understand?
No.
So
his
what?
Vocabulary is
So decrepitude is as you decrepit, as you become old. So the indignities is pretty much the humiliations, the sufferings, mental, physical. He goes, are boundless. So it never fucking ends. Right. So when you hear that, one, it breaks your heart, but at the same time, you're like, this guy's a realist, and he knows how to write so beautifully that even his own life, as his brain, you know, is not functioning the same way, and I'm sure. Maybe, I don't know, he pisses himself, shit himself, I don't know, but he's saying it's boundless. And it goes back to Al's quote, we're here, we only have one life, one vessel. Sometimes it's painful, sometimes it's fun, sometimes it's funny, but the point is you got to give it a go, you got to give it the beans. And like my new favorite, Troy Hawk, shoulders back, head up, smash it, because you've only got one life. And so these people, to me, the people in Deadwood, the actors that celebrated it, I've learned a lot from it, and I keep on learning a lot from it. And I think if you paid attention, Camila, when you're ready to watch the series and the movie, I think you're going to learn a lot too, because it's not just about that piece of history. There's a lot of philosophical quotes there, and I think David Milch is the reason why. So thank you very much. What can we say to people?
Yeah, if you guys want to go check out our other episodes, they're on Spotify and on YouTube. And I also have an Instagram account at Submerged Podcast. If you want to go give us a follow, comment, anything you want us to talk about, just let us know. But we hope you guys enjoyed today.
Thank you, everybody. Cheers.
Thank you.
Ciao, ciao.